Okay, so I think we should dive right into this.
Okay.
And, something that a lot of people, are probably thinking about if they're thinking about creating content
Right.
is, am I even good enough to do this?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so I think we should kind of unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, that's such a common feeling, especially when you're first starting out.
Exactly.
You see all these other people out there doing such a great job. You think, oh my gosh, I could never.
Right. And it's like, how do I even, and especially like when you're on social media and you're kind of comparing yourself to all these other people
Absolutely
doing amazing things.
It's so easy to get caught up in that comparison trap.
Right. And, so we're going to kind of look at this, through the lens of philosophy and psychology a little bit.
I love it.
And one of the things that I think is really interesting is that a lot of people call this the perfection myth.
Right.
This idea that we have to be perfect before we can even start.
Exactly. Yeah, and one of the sources we have actually calls it the perfection myth.
Yeah.
It's this idea that we need to be flawless before we can even think about sharing our work.
Exactly.
And social media, as you were saying, doesn't help with this.
Right.
You constantly see these perfectly curated feeds that make it seem like everyone else has it all figured out.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah, and that's where I think Elaine de Botton is really interesting.
Yes, he's got such an interesting perspective on this.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, Elaine de Botton is a philosopher.
He is.
And he wrote a book called The Consolations of Philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he kind of brings an interesting perspective to this.
He does. He does. He argues that this pursuit of perfection is not only a myth, but it can actually be detrimental to our well-being and our creativity.
So it's actually holding us back.
Absolutely. When you're constantly measuring yourself against some unattainable ideal, you're setting yourself up for disappointment and potentially even paralyzing yourself from taking action.
So instead of trying to be perfect, what should we be doing?
He encourages us to shift our focus away from this illusion of perfection and embrace authenticity instead.
Okay, so being genuine.
Precisely.
Okay.
And this is where the research of Dr. Brené Brown adds another layer of insight.
Okay, so Brené Brown.
Yes, she's done extensive work on the power of vulnerability.
Vulnerability. Okay, interesting.
And her findings are so relevant to anyone wanting to create content.
Okay, so how does vulnerability and content creation go together?
Well, Brown argues that vulnerability isn't about oversharing or weakness, but about having the courage to show up as you are.
Okay.
Imperfections and all. And this really resonates with what de Botton was saying about embracing imperfection.
Okay, so you're kind of tying those two together.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does vulnerability help us as creators then?
It allows us to connect with our audience on a much deeper level.
Oh, okay.
When you're willing to be vulnerable to share your struggles and imperfections, you're essentially saying, hey, I'm human, just like you. And that kind of authenticity is magnetic. It builds trust and makes your content so much more relatable.
So by being ourselves, flaws and all of it, we're actually creating a stronger connection with our audience.
And think about it. Who are you more likely to trust and engage with? Someone who presents themselves as perfect or someone who's real and relatable?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely kind of gravitate towards people who seem more genuine.
You do. And embracing vulnerability isn't just about connecting with your audience. It's also incredibly liberating for you as a creator.
Okay, how so?
Well, when you give yourself permission to be imperfect, to make mistakes, to learn as you go, you take the pressure off yourself. You stop worrying about what other people think and start focusing on creating content that feels true to you.
Right, so you're not so worried about judgment and all that.
Exactly.
Okay.
And there's a beautiful quote by Carl Jung that really captures this idea. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are.
I love that quote.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's just a reminder that you don't need to be anyone other than yourself.
And that in itself is enough.
Yeah, and that is enough.
More than enough.
Yeah.
And think about this. No one else can tell your story the way you can.
That's true.
Yeah.
You have a unique perspective and experiences that no one else can replicate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what makes your voice so valuable.
Yeah, so for anyone out there listening who's feeling maybe a little held back by self-doubt, remember this. You don't need to be perfect to start creating.
In fact, embracing your imperfections might be the most powerful thing you can do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to kind of unpack that.
We are.
A little bit more.
I'm excited.
I think in the next section.
You too.
Okay.
Let's do it.
All right. It's like giving ourselves permission to just be ourselves.
And
you know what makes content so compelling is that sense of authenticity.
Exactly.
And realness.
Yeah.
You know?
You hit the nail on the head, and one of our sources even talks about how social media can sometimes be the culprit for fueling this whole perfection myth.
Right.
Think about it. You're scrolling through your feed, and all you see are these highlight reels, perfectly filtered photos, witty captions.
Right.
And it's so easy to feel like everyone else is living this picture-perfect life.
Right. And you start comparing your everyday life to someone else's carefully curated online persona.
Yeah.
It's like, no wonder so many of us feel inadequate.
Exactly. It's important to remember that what you see online is often just a tiny sliver of someone's reality.
Right.
It's the highlight reel, not the behind the scenes.
Right.
And just like you, those creators have their own doubts, insecurities, and struggles that they might not be sharing publicly.
So how do we break free from that comparison trap? Or like, how do we shift our mindset away from seeking that external validation and start valuing our own unique perspectives?
That's a great question. One powerful approach is to shift your focus inward. Instead of worrying about what others might think, ask yourself, what stories am I passionate about telling?
Okay.
What knowledge or experiences do I have that could be valuable to others?
So it's about connecting with your own motivations and sharing what feels authentic to you.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And when you create from that place of authenticity, you'll naturally attract an audience that resonates with your message and your perspective. Those are the connections that truly matter.
It's like finding your tribe, the people who get you.
Exactly.
And appreciate what you bring to the table.
And one of the sources we have talks about how this process of embracing imperfection and finding your authentic voice is actually a journey of self-discovery. It's about peeling back the layers of societal expectations and conditioning to uncover the real you,
Right.
the one with a unique story to tell.
It's almost like content creation becomes a tool for self-exploration then.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
You know, there's a certain courage that comes with embracing your imperfections and putting yourself out there.
It's definitely a step outside of that comfort zone, for sure.
It is. It takes vulnerability, but the rewards are immense. Not only do you connect with your audience on a deeper level, but you also free yourself from that crippling fear of judgment.
It's like you're saying, hey, this is me, take it or leave it.
Exactly.
And in doing so, you open yourself up to a whole new level of creative freedom.
Exactly. You're no longer trying to fit into a mold or meet someone else's expectations. You're simply expressing yourself, and that's incredibly liberating.
So instead of asking ourselves, am I good enough?
Mm-hmm.
What's a more empowering question we could ask?
How about what makes my perspective unique?
Okay.
What stories can only I tell? Those questions can really spark your creativity and help you tap into your authentic voice.
I love that. It shifts the focus from self-doubt to self-discovery, from comparison to creation.
And it's important to remember that everyone starts somewhere.
Right.
Even the most successful content creators had to take that first step to overcome their own doubts and insecurities.
We all have to start somewhere.
Right. And, you know, it's okay to not have everything figured out. In fact, the beauty of content creation is that it's an ongoing journey of learning and growth.
It's about embracing the process, the stumbles along the way, and knowing that those stumbles are often where the greatest growth happens.
Absolutely. And those are the moments that often lead to the most authentic and relatable content.
It's like those imperfections, those moments of vulnerability are what make our stories so compelling and relatable.
They add depth and texture. They make us human.
So if you're feeling hesitant to start creating zest, remember this. You don't need to be perfect.
You just need to be you.
And to take that first step.
Embrace your imperfections.
Share your unique voice with the world.
Because the world is waiting to hear it.
So we've talked about like the perfection myth and embracing your imperfections and finding your voice.
Right.
But you know, when you actually sit down to create content,
yeah,
what does all that actually look like? Like, how do you put that into practice?
That's a great question. And that's where things get really exciting. Remember we were talking about everyone has like a treasure chest of stories just waiting to be unlocked?
Right.
Content creation is all about finding that key.
Okay.
To unlock those stories and share them with the world.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So how do we find the right key?
It starts with self-awareness. What are those experiences that have shaped you? What are you passionate about? What knowledge have you gained? Those are your raw materials, the things that make your stories unique and worth sharing.
So it's not about like trying to figure out what other people want to hear.
Yeah.
It's about what we want to say.
What excites you, what inspires you. And, you know, a lot of times The stories that resonate most deeply are the ones that come from a place of vulnerability,
Okay.
where you're willing to share your struggles and your triumphs and the moments where you didn't have it all figured out.
Right, because those are the things that make us human.
Absolutely. And think about the content that you consume. What draws you in? What makes you hit that like button or share a post with a friend?
Yeah, what makes you want to comment?
Exactly. It's content that feels authentic and relatable.
Yeah.
And even a little bit vulnerable. It's the stuff that makes you feel seen and understood.
Like you're not alone.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're all in this together. We all have our own journeys. But there are so many shared experiences.
Right.
So if you're feeling stuck, ask yourself, what are the stories that have shaped me into who I am today? What knowledge or insights do I have that could be valuable to others?
Okay.
What experiences have I had that might resonate with someone else going through something similar?
And it doesn't have to be like something huge.
Yeah.
It could be
Yes,
just like a small thing, but
Yeah.
something that you feel really strongly about.
Exactly. Sometimes the most powerful stories are the simplest ones, the ones that just come from the heart.
Right. And so we've been talking a lot about embracing imperfection, but
Yeah.
there's also the embracing your own perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. What makes your point of view different? What stories can only you tell?
Yeah, that's such a good question to think about.
It is. It really shifts the focus from self-doubt to self-discovery,
Right.
from comparison to creation.
Yeah.
And the answer to that question, that's where your content creation journey begins.
Okay.
Trust yourself, embrace your authenticity, and have the courage to share your voice with the world.
I love that.
Because the world is waiting to hear it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for breaking all that down for us today.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
This has been so insightful, and I really hope that everyone listening feels a little bit more empowered
Me too.
to just go out there and, just be themselves and share their stories.
That's what it's all about.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us, and to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in to this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.